Well, there's still a lot to discuss. Because, yeah, I was very impressed. I think there was certainly a coherency in the topic, and so there shouldn't be any problem for us to have a very fruitful discussion. Yeah, I would like to start with maybe the discussion about Szilvi's presentation, because yeah, for me that material was kind of the most shocking, because everything was staged there, but everything was real, hyper real, and so I would like you maybe to, or maybe also respond to, for instance, Constance, and this because you didn't have necessarily an artistic approach, but somehow, strangely enough, uncannily enough, the material that you presented starts to converge.
I don't know about, like, I checked out from the art scene, or that's what I'm telling to myself since I'm a journalist, that I don't care about the art anymore, but that's not really true. I think much of the inspiration to this talk also, or to this topic, came from an Italian magazine that's called Iconografia, and it's dealing with the 21st century political iconography, to say. And one of the latest issues was this cosplay, which intends that it also plays with the notion of Fukuyama, that we are in an era of post-history, where there is nothing new. The only way that we can interpret what's happening today in politics or in history is through the images or through what we have seen already happening in the 20th century. And there were like a lot of different examples that were enlisted from head of states. I don't know how Xi Jinping is cosplaying Mao, how, I don't know, Joe Biden is cosplaying Reagan and stuff like that. And I could really draw a parallel here, because if you think about Viktor Orban, he's really cosplaying Trump. He has all these slogans: "Make Europe Great Again." This was the slogan of the new Hungarian presidency to the European Parliament. But also at the same time, as there is the Ukraine war, we are a neighboring country. We cannot like pretend that it doesn't. Also, even though our head of government is constantly on some kind of peace missions, and we try to like really estrange ourselves from this situation, this was really so shocking and interesting for me, how through this kind of media spectacles, this kind of war, or kind of the exaltation of war culture is here. So that, I think that was the theoretical approach, but of course as a journalist that is dealing a lot with fakeries or fabricated news and fake personas and proxies and stuff, I could relate a lot to Constance's presentation. So I'm always like, I don't really like this term to myself that I'm a fact checker, but we feel the responsibility that we have to kind of say a final judgment to whatever is there out in the social media, whatever it's a grassroots thing or it's a top-down disinfo campaign and stuff like that. So I'm always myself as well a little torn in between what's the role of the media here, or to call people's attention if something is AI generated, really call it disinformation or not. I a little bit doubt that, but I don't want to take too much control.
Thank you. Well, I would like to make a thesis here that we go from, let's say, representation to simulation to something that is maybe larger than life, that is even more beautiful, more bigger, you know, all the tendencies that Constant showed us. And then this is somehow dialectically turning into violence. And so this is ultimately, yeah, where a lot of, you know, the things that you three dealt with, that there is a very long phase in which we do not really notice what's going on, and then there is this tipping point, this turn, which in a new essay I'm calling platform brutalism, and with the reference, of course, to Achim Mbembe's book on brutalism, where this kind of desert of the real kind of suddenly ends up in violence. Do you see that? Do you because you started with you know, this. You kind of operate already after this tipping point, so to say.
I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I have some thoughts what I would like to share in this respect. So what I found the most interesting when I was researching for this panel about this whole motherless scandal that I talked a bit lengthy about, there were very different approaches among women, whether they actually want to know if they are on the website or they are not on the website. Because some people were notified by their friends and family, some people were notified by, I don't know, people on Reddit who he had no idea about. And at the same time, what those women who don't want to know if they are on a website or not, they say that because they have they wouldn't have any tools to deal with this reality that would become their reality after finding out that they are listed on a hunt them down group. They would have zero tools on how to move on with their offline lives, because online and offline cannot be separated anymore, and as what I also tried to highlight in my presentation, that we have no idea when photos are taken of us, what those people want to do photos, what to do with these photos. For example, a friend of mine just posted on her Instagram last week that she was cycling on the Buddha side, and she just realized that the guy was taking a video of her, and she got scared, but at the same time because of this scandal popping up, she was so it went into her head, like, what does this guy want to do with this video? And she was like super badass and went up to that guy and told him that, hey, show me what is in your camera, and she made the guy delete the footage, but she was still like super scared afterward, like she has no idea how many other footages are out there of her cycling in the Buddha side. So I think that's that maybe that's what I want to say in this respect, that I think that there is this reality out there that we are not creating, that we are not consenting to, but and we don't have any tools to deal with them, even though we are part of that reality at this point. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, maybe Constance, can you say something about that turn? Do you see that this endless kind of mirroring in this world of AI will ultimately turn violent?
Can I briefly say something? I responded. I also wanted to ask, actually, because I remember that in China there's like this huge cultural departments of the army, really like army music and like army parties and like there's this whole cultural establishment of like integrating into like specific other cultural exercises to be able to kind of I don't know, normalize the idea of the army. So I'm also wondering in what sense that's also in another culture it's already normalized to do that type of cosplaying of, because you would see that type of, you would go to like army music. I remember like I was really surprised that I collected army house music, so like from specific regiments of the army that like threw parties and had army house music, and that sounded like Eurodance, and this was 2012. So I'm just wondering, like in that sense, if yeah, but pivoting to your question, I mean, I'm just thinking about like my artistic perspective of like kind of going online and then regurgitating all that, the enormous amounts of content, and not being able to regurgitate that. And now we have these tools to regurgitate all that content, and now that leaves much more room for these kind of other incentives and other kind of, let's say, dynamics that leave more room for, let's say, outsourcing that type of regurgitation, that kind of cultural regurgitation, and that if we outsource that to kind of cultural interpretation by way of machine, I do think that that's like a kind of dystopian narrative, yes.
I'm also interested in, to bring in maybe Charlotte's point, the utopian thing, like, I'm looking also for not a revelation or a resolution, but I'm thinking about, are there ways that we can develop tools, strategies, to effectively, do something against it, like this brave woman who probably only because there was such a scandal made out of it had the guts, the courage to do that, right? So there you can see that, let's say, publicizing it already was step one, maybe. But what are the step 2 or step 3? One of the things that we very often hear is this kind of idea, naive or not, of the reality trademark, right? Where an image that is taken can immediately, in a millisecond, either expose itself and make itself known as so-called real image. And thereby also, making it possible for other images to maybe even force them to come up with the obligatory, let's say, AI logo or something else, right? I'm not saying that the deep fakes will make themselves known as deep fakes. That would be probably quite, naive to think, but for instance, can you say something from the perspective of working in disinformation strategies for so long? If there is a utopian way out of this unfolding nightmare.
Utopian, I don't know. I'm not really working for so long. I'm just 2.5 years, so I wouldn't call myself a senior yet. But getting back to your point that there is like a disjunction between the signifier and the signified, for me I think there is another factor, and of course my approach is from the media consumption. If you see how people consume images, and there is already this cliched explanation that people choose what they want to believe in, and they kind of cherry pick from the information ecosystem whatever they feel that they can resonate with, and whatever label you put next to it, or if you say that that is falsified, or you see any exclamation marks or whatever flags, they are going to have like this mental leap that they're going to think that you want to hide something from me, and I will believe it even more. And I think that, for example, there is an image that it really stuck in my mind, and I like to bring it back again and again. It was a picture taken in Blaha tér, if you are familiar with Budapest. It was taken like 15 years ago, and you can pretty much see on the picture that it was taken with an analog camera, because you see the warmth of the image, but also the old logos. It was before the reconstruction, so the square has been just reconstructed, so you can see now a lot of trees. So it's like completely different. But it was posted very recently with saying that after 14 years of the Orbán government, people still line up for free food, because there was a long line of poor people trying to get some free meal. And it was so obvious that this picture was not taken. Maybe it was taken under MSP rule, or sorry, Gyurcsány era. But still, people totally could, I don't know, ignore all the fact that was kind of encoded within the image. And so I think it's not this image forensics that we are going to. We also have like this kind of tools that you can see the difference in compression, the difference. So all these kind of things. But if people want to believe in something, they will do that nonetheless, I guess. And for just another tendency, which is really remarkable in the pro-government scene of the media, is that they also tend to use more and more, so these kind of high-tech tools or these image detection tools to prove false something that is true. And I think that is also like this black box nature of technology, that you input something, you don't really understand what's going on, and there is a result, and you can really mess up with that and get people to believe in you, and you point to the machine that it was decided by the machine, so it's not, I'm not biased and stuff like that. So you can also see the flip side of the story.
Yeah. Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
Because the same thing happened with the fake identities, right? So that there would be a technical way to verify if an identity would be real, and then you would have like for example in China, you would have to upload you would have an identity number, you would have to upload your passport. So for example, when I got on Weibo when I was in China, I just asked how the identity number was compiled, and I could restructure the identity number and spoofed it. And that's how I got the Weibo number. But then I also realized that if that type of technical reference point is enabled, then it kind of removes all the kind of, let's say, agency that a lot of people would have to self-organize and to protest and to kind of form alternatives. And I think that's also, like, for example, with an incentive like that, if there's a technical verification of, like, for example, this is the truth, this is what it was, then it also removes all the alternatives. Then somebody could have a monopoly on that, or somebody could own that system. And exactly what you're saying, like this kind of saying like, okay, if the computer said it's real, you know, like if there's an intention to be able to control that, then what do you have if you want to self-organize and say like, we would want to have an alternative, and we would want to socially kind of organize ourselves to kind of express that alternative in how we see things. And I think that's also, to me, like a kind of danger that after a while we would start to believe in these kind of technical verification systems.
Okay. I have a follow-up question. Maybe it's a related direction out, let's say, because I wanted to turn or ask a question about maybe the ownership of data, because a lot of the things that you were talking about was about the functionalization of the spoofing, right? Which can happen because, for instance, these kind of pictures can be stolen from Instagram, but maybe they're not even stolen, right? They're already on Instagram, they're not your pictures anymore. So maybe instead of protecting the verification, can we also protect the ownership of these data? So I guess another kind of utopian idea that goes around is that of the Fediverse, or building the other platforms where we can actually, govern the commons that we have been cultivating on the copyleft side of the spectrum. So maybe, Constant, this is a question for you. You're building these kind of platforms. What is your perspective? What are the steps forward? Is this just naive, or can we do something there?
I don't think it's naive, I think it's beautiful, but I do think that there's it can actually be both, of course, it can be naive and beautiful at the same time. But I do think that there's, I see a tendency for myself that I would want to hold control, or like, and there's, in the control of like, want to keep it intimate or private, and you want to share it within, like, let's say, like, culturally like-minded. It becomes a cultural artifact. Even the platform becomes a cultural artifact, and technologically opening it up. And then you could use Git, and you could use collaboration methods, all these things. There is this kind of like cultural informality, let's say, that is important on these platforms. And for me, it's important to safeguard that, because there's communities that could run on a mesh network, but the whole thing thrives because that community has a certain informality or certain culture to enable that type of exchange. And I think, yeah, to me that's a separation again from the technical standard. And I also, but briefly, I also wanted to, I thought of, when you were saying that story, I thought of a friend of mine, Sam Levine, who got doxxed for like an action he did, and the whole doxing thing. And then when I met him in Amsterdam, he's a close friend, he would receive calls of other people being doxxed, and then they found their way to him to like take the step, like walk through the steps of what you have to do. Of like, okay, get a new phone number there, do that, go there, like go to another house, find these people, collect them, and it was like an informal exchange. And it was like this informal thing of like having to ask this person, and it wasn't like he walked from somebody through the steps and had to counsel them through it. So it became this, yeah, so for me it's really hard to separate that type of emotional, cultural connection that you would have on these platforms from the ideals of like a technical solution. I hope that was...
Next question.
That's why we're here. I know, I was like, sort of two little things, and one is like as a student in photography many years ago, one of the things we really learned was that the image is not truth. And for like one of the big examples were the photographs of Suzanne Macelas, who was a very strongly pro-Sandinista artist and photographer, whose very same images that were meant to support the Sandinista movement were used in the American Congress to support support for the Contras. So for me, that's always been this, like even when we could trust in images, I was trained to not trust the truthiness of images. And I wanted to speak to like the violence, because the violence is already here. It's the here that's not here. So there's always a violence happening somewhere, and I'm thinking that like we shouldn't really speak about a war in Ukraine as much as a war on Ukraine, right? And then this, like, for me, there's a war on bodies, and the war on bodies is part of for me, the machinery of imagination. So but it already has very real and concrete violences that happen against women, against trans bodies, against minority violent bodies. So there's already the economic violence, the physical violence, and the racial violence. It's already happening every day, everywhere, somewhere, right? So right now somebody's being abused somewhere, probably in Budapest or not too far from here. So that violence is being acted out all the time. But these like images and these imagineering technologies up the game and normalize the violence. And I think this is the thing to combat, because for me this is not about ownership, because as long as we're in public space, our images are out there, they are copyable, reproducible, but it's the imagination that we can foster that allows us to think otherwise and to de-escalate the violence. Because this is all about like the war, the soldier boys, right? It's just all this pumping up culture of hyper-masculinity.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly respond to that, because for me, even though it wasn't the highlight of my presentation, but there is an aspect that you can also be violent, or you can promote violence through curatry or through like masking it through other devices. And this is why, for me as a journalist, have been invested in like talking a lot with members of this pro-Ukrainian internet group. It's called the NAFOs. It's like a spooky name that is taken from NATO, but it's like the North Atlantic Fellas organization. And on the surface level, they are like dog faces. They are very cute. They are cartoon characters. You can personalize them. You can make it to your own liking. It's like your real online persona. But at the same time, when issues like that come up, that, for example, they laugh on if a Russian soldier dies, or if they wish, or they really dehumanize the enemy, but in a kind of mocking way, but it's still there somewhere. So I think that if violence is not manifested like directly, there are also a lot of like sophisticated techniques that can still go through under the skin or something like that.
I think my question things into the same topic. It would be about like kind of the variety of emotions triggered by the representation of crisis. I think we all laughed from time to time during all three of your presentations, and you know, while looking at images of horror, and I would be just curious about your opinion on the role of humor in all of this, and like how can really humor be employed in like by cultural workers to deal with crisis, or what's your stance? Like all three of you, I would be interested. Maybe four of you.
Back to you. I mean, for humor, this novel is one of the par excellence examples, I think. Because it just plays with the strategy that I think we know from Dada on, from the early 20th century, how if you just don't imagine an alternative, but like put something or invert something like upside down, by diverting the original intention of the thing itself can bring about the change. And I think that this kind of irony and humor that is pretty much deployed in this online collective that I was mentioning, and that's one way of dealing with horror and suffering, and also just to vent out all the emotions that you're exhausted, or there is a fatigue going on. And I think it's like a conscious strategy, because I can see that there was a peak in 2022 in the beginning, around February, March, and everybody was very interested. There was a big demand for news, but after that there is a curve. It like flattens out, and nowadays people just don't want to hear about it anymore. And this is humor can be like a really great strategy to somehow pull people back in this discourse and try to make them motivated to talk about it or keep it on the agenda.
When I was watching your presentation, Szilvi, it was very interesting for me to see these kind of things, and I was wondering that where priming as a thing starts, and where violence, it transforms to violence, because the most strange thing with the Fidesz peace campaign was that after a while, when we went in time, and they always talk about the war, it was their peace slogan was a kind of chance to them to talk about war constantly. So I totally felt that it was a priming thing to normalize the idea of war. And the strange thing is that many times this is happening, and you can. It was very, very, very strange to see that how they can wreck all their attack on our unconsciousness in a kind of baggage of peace. We are on the side of the peace, but we are constantly talking about war. And I think it's much more common. And when I see this kind of things that you showed, I was thinking about, is this kind of priming? That it's a kind of pervasiveness, that everywhere you can see this kind of stuff. It's a kind of strategy from different directions to normalize the idea of war. It's like, it's very strange. It's not just about recruiting guys to go to soldiers, but for those who actually against war, attacking them to actually normalize the idea of war, and they can't do anything. So the strange thing is that what you think about that, where these all kind of strategies end, and where completely propaganda starts, or is it a propaganda already priming? And the other thing, and after that you, okay, I think when I see it, it's like the Konrad Becker's Tactical Reality Dictionary. Do you remember? It's like totally, so it's not new in the sense that it was ongoing, war is ongoing, I don't know, since I was born, it's war somewhere, so it's not like, it's like 21st century is not so much different than the 12th century, or I don't know, so it's, we know about war, and it's constantly in the media and everywhere, but how we're talking about it, it's different. But I think Konrad Becker is a very good example for this. So back then, what do you think about this kind of planning strategies?
I think it's always difficult to find out what's in the head of the people who are responsible for putting out this type of propaganda. And also to find the logic in it or seek rationality. But you see that on a discourse level there's much fake news coming from Fidesz speaking that the European Union wants to introduce compulsory conscription and it wants to have like a joint EU army, that Manfred Weber is popularizing this idea and it's just wrong. But what you see with these reality shows that it's happening that you can really participate in this kind of training in a television studio setting is that maybe they want to initiate this concept of that there is not like you don't have to be a soldier but you can try how does it feel, maybe you will like it, and maybe also to incorporate it that it's not something that you separated from your identity but it's just one identity marker for you to be. So it's not that you give up your ordinary life and then you become like a full-time soldier, but it's also like part of your duty as a citizen that if time comes you might need to save, to serve for the country. So this is why I really liked about these influencers, because you could see that there is like a wide array really from Veszörményi Nagy, from MOME up until Sobert Norbi, so that also see that we don't really see that Veszörményi Nagy Gergely would like really, what is he doing really as a soldier? We don't see it, we just see like neat, sterile images that he puts on a uniform. He's a handsome man, so he can like really act it out that garners a lot of likes and hearts and minds of the people, but we don't know what it actually means. And I really like that everything is focused on this part of really military lifestyle, just the training, because if you are just training for something, it can be like as a sport activity, it can be healthy for you, so there is no ideology behind. They don't need name the enemy, so we don't know that is it already an Axis strategy that we are going to leave NATO and we are going to fight I don't know who, or is it the other side? So if there will be a ceasefire, this is why we want to achieve, who is really going to be our enemy? And this is why I really like that if you look behind the curtain and you see these individual accounts that soldiers or military personnel being in the army, they still go out to do this kind of airsoft. I really like these airsoft communities because they reveal a lot, because then it's also LARPing because you put on a costume, but then there are, you have to choose really and define whose patches you put on, that you reenact World War II on the side of the Nazis, or you choose to be a member of the Wagner group, or then you make your choice and you make it obvious that where your sympathies really lies, that the official don't try to hide.
Next.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to ask, because you are all internet, let's say, researcher, also I guess in the room. I've been researching a little bit dead internet theory lately. I don't know if you've heard of that term, but it's there's different ideologies behind it, but one is that in the near future, excuse me, everything is going to be generated by bot and fake news, so there's nothing that's reliable. And the second one is that actually there's a very superficial vitrine of what's available, and that we actually don't use any resources that are actually possible, and it's about completely reinventing the internet if possible. But I wanted to ask, because I think that the dead internet theory make it very difficult for internet researchers to do their job properly. I mean, I'm thinking, is it the end of media studies even? I mean, if we think about internet per se, because if you mentioned some of the tools that can be used to check if it's AI generated or not, but if any time now you look at a phenomenon online, if any time you look into a trend on TikTok and whatnot, you have to second guess if it's AI generated, how are you even supposed to do journalism, analysis, and just theory of media?
And do we know who's attacking the Internet Archive? Like, it's happening right now.
Yeah.
It's happening right now. We don't know who's doing it. There's an incredible incentive to accomplish that, because it's this method of self-organization, it's this method of cultural reference, and I think there is an incentive to destroy it. So I think you're completely right. I think it will destroy these methods of reference, and I think that actually refers to other points that were made before, of like this kind of like the non-existent cultural futures, like regurgitating kind of. Just remember this clip by Joshua Citarella now of like speaking about. Music being regurgitated, and how now there's like music that people 30 years ago would completely understand, and we've come from generations of like new music all the time that we couldn't explain, or like people from 30 years ago wouldn't understand that was music, and by now we're just in this cycle that we can't position it in time anymore. We don't have these clear markers anymore. So yeah, I think there's a truth to it. Did you?
I guess it was more like, what would be tools of reactivation for this kind of research to stay relevant if we come to a dead internet theory state?
Books.
Well, just food for thought.
I'm not going to comment on that internet theory. I'm an internet critic, so one last question, maybe before we go to have a break.
Because because I wanted to come back to the pictures and the war of pictures and war with pictures and why that you were talking about the war, the pictures of war, of course, and the violence. And I had like a set of reflection after your amazing presentation. It's full of inspiration for me. And also comparing to or combining together with our experiences with talking to people, working with people in Ukraine, artists in the front line, for example, who moved there and after a few months or a year they are back and they try to be still artists after their experience, for example. And the question is, maybe there is not that, there is a challenge maybe for us. Because the war was always part of the visual culture. Yeah? The war, the battlefield, the war was like there was only a short period, maybe last 2-3 generations, that we it was like a kind of the exclusion of this pictures of war, pictures of violence from the museums, this abstraction of visual space. The trauma of the First World War was so direct and in a sensitive way present in avant-garde, first avant-garde, but the Second World War was covered by abstract paintings strongly, yeah, and this kind of the liberal and critical position lost something, I think. We lost a direct connection to the visual representation of violence, and maybe this is something, and everything was grabbed by the rednecks, this right wings, and this is what's coming back now with this TikTok soldiers, with that's all. I feel that there is more easy and more flexible for them to talk about violence also in the humor way, and it's to promote the violence in that way, also that scutization of war and so on. Yeah? And then this is what I sort of think about and we stay with irony and the post-irony. And this is, I think, too less to confront with the reality where the work is a part of. That it's queer people dying in the army. And how to talk about this, how to, I don't know, represent them from keeping the sensitive, critical, or the perspective, but to stay serious and to stay in front of very important turn. Because if not, we probably, the voice, the visibility of this right-wing representation of that very serious relations are stronger and stronger in front of community, yeah? In front of people. That's my question in a way. I'm not sorry.
Yeah, I tend to see this more like a closing remark, Ron. It wasn't really a question, but really a challenge. Maybe also we could take that into tomorrow, when we're going to speak about the work of Ukraine TV and the question of how artists respond, you know, right in the middle of a war that is happening, you know, right next to us here in Hungary. So yeah, I would like to thank the presenters, and we'll hear from Charlotte tomorrow, and let's have a break. Thank you.